Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast, a show created to be your go-to source for straightforward retirement advice. Best of all, it is presented in a language that you can understand. Here's your host, certified financial planner, Greg Gonzalez.
Hey, welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast. I'm Greg Gonzalez. Thanks for joining me today. This is episode number 206. On today's episode, I wanted to talk about lessons that we can learn from current retirees. So oftentimes when someone's retired or has been retired for a couple months, couple years, I will ask them, what has surprised you about retirement? What was different than you expected? Maybe even what would you warn others about? And another question is, what would you have done differently? And of course, that's always a tough question because we don't want to live a life of regrets. So that's going to be really the main topic of discussion on today's episode. But I'm also going to answer some questions that have been asked, that have been submitted through our website, which is retirestrongfa.com. If you're a new listener, check out our website. There's free resources that you can download. We just released our 2026 tax planning guide, so that's now available. We've got our market outlook for 2026. We also have our retirement secret sauce, which is very popular. We have our women's guide to retirement, as well as a number of different resources, Social Security guide. So check all those out, retirestrongfa.com. And I've mentioned on previous episodes, we've had a lot of listeners reach out that are maybe interviewing retirement planners. And maybe you're one of those people. Maybe you're wanting to get serious about retirement planning in 2026 and you want a second opinion. Maybe you don't have a personalized retirement plan or strategy in place yet, and that's something you're looking for. If that's the case, again, there is a form on our website that you can fill out. We'll get in touch with you that way, and we'll see if we're going to be a good fit to work with you to help you plan for that successful retirement. But I do want to thank all the people that have reached out. Cheryl is our client relationship manager, and she continues to tell me week in and week out what nice listeners we have that she gets the opportunity to speak with. So thank you. So to start off, to kick off this episode, I wanted to, again, answer some questions that had been submitted that our listeners might find interesting before we get into our main topic today, which is what are the lessons or takeaways that we can learn from the folks that have already retired so that we can be more prepared for retirement. So things that maybe surprise them or they would warn others about. I think this is going to be a really good episode. I've done a lot of research. I've asked a lot of questions of retirees. And so there's a lot to share in the second half of today's episode. Before we get into that, one of the questions that was submitted was asking if I've written a book or if I plan to write a book on retirement planning. And I have started to. I've started to put together a retirement playbook. But one of my concerns with this, whenever you write a book and it's based on, current laws or things that could change in the future that just kind of put the message or some of the lessons of your book, outdate them. And I'll give an example of what I'm talking about. So in writing this retirement playbook, I'm being very, very careful so I don't timestamp it or I don't put it at risk of being outdated or less effective should there be a future tax law change, a change to how retirement accounts are taxed or how they operate, or maybe a significant change to Social Security. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. This was back in 2017, I think it was. I was giving a presentation at a library on Social Security, and it was a packed room. And there was a gentleman that during my presentation, he stood up and he said, everybody needs to buy this book on Social Security. This is the Bible on Social Security planning. And he read the title and said who the author was and recommended everybody buy that book. My response was, yes, that's a very good book on Social Security. I'm very familiar with it. However, it's outdated. And let me explain why it's outdated. Is in 2015, there was a bipartisan budget act that had some significant changes in the bill that was passed into law So basically, they got rid of strategies, Social Security claiming strategies that we had been using for years and years and years. It did away with those. What I mean is file and suspend strategy and filing a restricted application. They kind of put a deadline on that depending on your age. So that book that this gentleman held up, while it was a very, very good book on Social Security planning before this 2015 Bipartisan Budget Act was put into effect and passed, once that bill was passed and it became law and made all these changes, that book was absolutely worthless. In fact, there were several chapters that at that point were not applicable because they were explaining strategies and claiming options that no longer existed. So if you were to buy that book after, 2016, it would really, really be misleading. And the information that it provided in strategies are no longer applicable. They're no longer legal based on the laws that had passed since the book had been published. So it was outdated. So in, drawing up this book, this retirement planning playbook, if you will, I'm trying to be really, really cognizant of that because there are so many different changes that are probably likely to occur in the future. We just don't know when. We don't know what they're going to be. But for example, they have changed the way Social Security is taxed twice. So before 1983, Social Security income was not taxed at all for anybody. Then in 1983, up to 50% of it could be taxed. And then again, they changed it 10 years later in 1993. And now, as it currently stands, up to 85% of your Social Security income could be taxed at the federal level. And it's anybody's guess what the future will hold. So hope that answers that question. I've had, I guess probably over the last couple of years, I've had quite a few people ask me, hey, when's your book coming out? So that is the answer. It is in the works, and we're not going to charge for it. It's going to be a retirement playbook that all can enjoy, don't have to pay for it. It's going to be available electronically. And just like on this podcast, I divulge about 85% of what I know about retirement planning on this podcast in a language that people can understand. People ask, well, why do you withhold that 15%? Well, that's because a lot of it is just very specific strategies that are not going to apply to everybody out there. They're not going to apply to the masses. Very unique circumstances where specific strategies will come into play. And those secrets, if you will, are just not useful or applicable to everybody across the board. So I kind of hold those tight to my chest, and we utilize those strategies for specific instances for our clients at Retire Strong. But with 85% of all that I know, I share on this podcast, a lot of it's going to be included in this retirement playbook. We had another question that was actually asked on a Zoom call. I was a listener of the podcast, and they ask, looking at my situation, what am I doing wrong? And one of the things that kind of jumped out to our team at Retire Strong was they were putting very little emphasis on tax planning. And let me explain what I mean by that. If somebody has different buckets of money, the different accounts are taxed. In a lot of instances, they're taxed differently. So if you take a distribution on your IRA, pre-tax traditional IRA, that is taxed as ordinary income. And you get a 1099, and you get to decide whether you want to withhold taxes or not. And you've got another bucket maybe that's called a Roth IRA. And if you take a distribution from that and you meet all the requirements like the 5-year rule, that might be a tax-free, will likely be a tax-free distribution, don't have to pay taxes. And a lot of people, and we see this quite often, the last couple of years when interest rates have been much, much higher, they might have CD interest that they earned, maybe a bank CD, they bought a CD at a credit union, whatever the case may be, but that is taxed as ordinary income. The interest that you earn from that CD is taxed as ordinary income. Again, you get a 1099 at the end of the year, and it shows how much interest you earned on that CD for that entire year. If it's a high interest money market, same deal. It's taxed as ordinary income. But let's say you have a brokerage account, and let's say you have qualified dividends. One of the advantages of having qualified dividends is they're taxed at an advantageous lower rate. They're not taxed as ordinary income. There's people out there that may have a tax-deferred annuity. And the way those work is the taxes that you pay first, the gains are taxed as ordinary income first. But once you spend through the gains, then it's considered return of principal. And as you spend those, it's return of principal, and that's not taxed. And it's no surprise if you have pension income, generally taxed as ordinary income. You might have a brokerage account, and let's say you had some capital gains. They might be taxed at, if you harvested some capital gains, that might be taxed at the capital gain rate. And there's plenty of people out there that are able to harvest long-term capital gains and pay zero capital gain tax. Meanwhile, other people will pay 15% a long-term capital gain or 20% long-term capital gain tax. And I think very few people really put as much emphasis into where you're taking your income in retirement and looking ahead and saying, okay, this year we're going to do something different than maybe next year when my Social Security kicks in. Because if you can manage your taxes in retirement, you can keep more of your money. That's what it really boils down to. And the way my mind works is a little bit different than the average person, I think, but there's a lot of people that are out there, in my opinion, that are probably paying more in taxes than they need to. And it's sort of like if you're driving and you notice, okay, the gas mileage that I'm getting, it's not so great. But then, okay, maybe there's something else causing this. Maybe it's your tires need to be properly inflated, and that's causing the issue or contributing to the issue. Or maybe it's a fuel filter that needs to be changed. Maybe just the oil itself, the oil that you use, they say specific oils will actually give you better gas mileage. Maybe it's a spark plug that needs to be replaced. Maybe using cruise control more often could help you get more miles per gallon out of your vehicle. But all of these factors, out of the research that I've done, do contribute to some degree on the final, gas mileage that you get out of your vehicle. Of course, some more than others. Now, getting back to our retirement example, your different sources of income all factor into your total tax bill in retirement. So, for example, when you start your Social Security income, and let's say 85% of that is taxed, what might be the ripple effect of that? Is that going to impact the capital gains taxes that you might pay? Or if you did a Roth conversion that year, does that impact how much taxes you'll actually pay on your Social Security income? Or does the interest that you're earning maybe on money markets and CDs and savings accounts, that's taxed as ordinary income? So is that causing you to pay more taxes on your Social Security income or throw you into the next tax bracket? So kind of looking at taxes as a sum of the parts, because they're all the different accounts, Social Security income, pension income, they're all kind of taxed differently. Annuities are taxed differently. We've had quite a few clients that have inherited annuities, which is different than inheriting like an IRA or a 401k. The rules are different. The taxes are different. We talked about how qualified dividends are taxed differently. And therefore, that's why some people prefer receiving and living on their dividends in retirement for the tax benefits, as opposed to taking income from other sources that might be taxed more heavily. So I hope this discussion on tax planning and retirement has been helpful. It was a little longer than I had originally anticipated. And of course, there's things that we didn't discuss, like municipal bond interest. We see that on occasion, or maybe rental income. Now, a new one for me in 2025 was I got to see somebody that owned municipal bonds inside of their Roth IRA. And let me explain why that might not be a good idea. All the interest that you earn inside of a Roth IRA is going to be tax-free. So a municipal bond, one of the benefits of that is the interest that it pays is, generally speaking, it's going to be tax exempt at the federal level and even the state and local level for some people. depending on the specific bond that you own. So owning the municipal bond inside of a Roth IRA, it kind of defeats the purpose. You would want to own it maybe outside of a Roth IRA where you get the benefit of the tax savings. But that was a new one that we saw in 2025. It's the first time I've ever seen somebody own a municipal bond inside of their Roth IRA. The next listener question that I wanted to mention on this episode before we get into lessons from retirees is somebody that had submitted a question or really a comment about their 401k. And this was the third person that has mentioned that their company does not offer this super catch-up, which is basically if you're between the ages of 60 and 63, by the end of the year, they allow you a greater catch-up contribution to your 401k. This person also mentioned that their company doesn't offer a match, that they only offer profit sharing as well. And it was more of a comment, but it's a great lesson here, is that we all need to be aware of that 401ks are different company to company. So one company may have a fantastic match. I have mentioned that the best 401k match I've ever seen is Microsoft. They match dollar for dollar up to the contribution limit. So for example, let's say you're 58 years old, you work at Microsoft, the match is $32,500. So if you contribute $32,500, they will match you dollar for dollar up to that limit, that $32,500 limit. It's incredible. Other companies opt to have a lot lower match or no match at all. Other companies will say, okay, we're not going to have a match and we'll just do maybe profit sharing. But some companies, when it comes to things like the super catch-up, which again applies to people between the ages of 60 and 63, just because that's a law, your company may not offer that. It's really up to your company and the custodian of your 401k, just like some companies don't offer 401k loans and others do. Some companies change their 401k custodian or the provider like every 12 months. And the reason I know this is we've got a client that works with our firm, and I would say probably once a year, if not every other year, they're emailing us, letting us know, hey, we're being told that our 401k provider is changing and they're going to this new company. And the investment options are changing, and we should probably take a closer look at this now that we know the date that the plan is switching hands and what the investment options are now going to look like. So that said, some companies have better investment option choices than other companies. That's another difference. The internal costs of your 401k might be higher or lower than another company's 401k. And the last thing that I want to mention, and we've seen this on occasion, is as far as the 401k match and getting the most out of that, is typically let's say it's a 5% dollar for dollar match. Let's say you max out your 401k by October. And so by the end of October, so in November and December, you're not contributing because you already maxed it out. Let's assume that your company 401k doesn't have an after-tax bucket to contribute to. That's another difference is some companies, after you max it out, they will allow you to contribute to a after-tax bucket within the 401k. That's a whole nother story. Some companies offer what's called a mega Roth option, where you can then contribute over and above the limit, which is $32,500 if you're over 50 and not between the ages of 60 and 63. Once you reach that, you could then contribute to an after-tax bucket. And then if your plan allows the mega Roth, you can convert the money from the after-tax to the Roth 401k. Again, some companies offer this, some don't. And I hear a lot of people say, well, that's not fair that this other company offers that and my company doesn't. I agree with you. It isn't fair, but you just need to realize that, yeah, these are the laws within 401ks, and some have better opportunities and different rules than others. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you hear me talk about rules and strategies within 401ks that we see and then that can be beneficial to you, your specific 401k with your organization may not allow you, may handcuff you, and you might not be able to take advantage of some of these options that other people's 401ks allow them to. So I am sorry if you happen to be disappointed that maybe your company 401k doesn't have these features that other people might have with their 401k. It's just one of those things in life. Life's not fair. Okay, I wanted to switch gears here and talk about retirees and the surveys that have been conducted from those that have been retired for months or even years to say, okay, what were you surprised about in regards to retirement? Are you enjoying retirement? What do you miss about working? What do you not like about retirement? What would you warn others about? What would you do differently if you could go back in time? And maybe even what do you like the best about retirement? And the answers, what I'm about to share is what I have personally heard from people that are clients of our firm that are retired, have been retired for quite some time now, and then also studies and focus groups where they interview a group of retirees. So first off, overwhelmingly, it seems like what people miss about working, about their career, was the social interactions with the people. Now, they don't miss the stress, they don't miss the commuting or things like that, but they certainly miss the social aspect of their work life before they retired. The other things that were kind of more streamlined was health insurance and the health insurance costs. Since it was under group health insurance for most people, they didn't really worry about that. And the costs were maybe coming out of their paycheck for the premiums that they were paying, and they didn't really notice the healthcare costs as much. Maybe dental and vision were covered. For most people, taxes were taken out of their paycheck, so that wasn't something that they really noticed. It was kind of automatically taken care of with the taxes being withheld, and they didn't really have to think about it. And life was sort of in a routine. And that was something for some people, having a structured day and work week is very, very good for some people. Other people say that they miss the mental stimulation that came with their work. And there's other people that said that their purpose, their identity came with their work. So when they retired, it was like they were losing a part of their identity or their self. Now, there was a study done in 2024 from the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College. And surprisingly, 43% of people that were surveyed said they were finding themselves enjoying retirement more than they had expected. Those same people reported more time and more freedom. You can't put a price on time and freedom, of course, and also less stress. Because stress a lot of times is caused from our profession, from the lack of work-life balance. And the number of people that were sort of forced into retirement, either because of maybe company layoffs, early retirement packages that were offered, which is kind of a form of a reduction of the workforce by a company. Also, people retiring due to health-related instances that were out of their control, or maybe health-related circumstances with their spouse, and they needed to help with that care. Those were kind of the surprises and reasons why people retired earlier than they were anticipating. And by the way, I've mentioned that over and over again. That's why I like to see somebody get a retirement plan in writing, in place in those years leading up to retirement. So if that does happen, if your health were to go downhill, if the company does go through some layoffs and you're one of them, at least you've got a written plan in place and you know where you stand and you have a strategy, hopefully, to ease yourself or transition yourself into retirement, and you're not all of a sudden starting from scratch with your retirement planning. Some other surprises that people had mentioned, and I've heard this face-to-face, but also this study unveiled that, was health insurance costs were oftentimes more than someone had anticipated in retirement. So meaning copays, deductibles, like I had mentioned, dental and vision. Depending on your Medicare plan, that may or may not be something that's covered. Or if you want to look at getting a dental plan, is it really a good bang for your buck? Now, some people they struggle on how to fill those hours in the day in the work week. And so oftentimes for those people, especially the busybodies out there that like to stay busy, and they might start to go stir crazy at home, or even drive their spouse crazy with being around the house and always around. For those people, we often see them get maybe part-time jobs that maybe aren't very stressful. They're not necessarily doing it just for the extra income, but kind of, to keep their mind stimulated, and maybe they can find something that they enjoy where it doesn't really feel like work. Other surprises that people had mentioned was, and I think maybe once you're retired and that paycheck kind of goes away, you start to maybe look at expenses. And like we had a client, for example, that had mentioned their trash bill had gone up 35% in 1 year, and homeowners insurance jumped 25%. And they're thinking, gosh, as I was kind of calculating my expenses on a month-to-month basis when I was preparing for retirement, I didn't expect these big increases. And especially grocery bill goes up, different things like that. So many people had referenced that their costs of living was more than they had anticipated, just simply because of these big spikes in utility bills and things like that. Now, one of the stresses or big surprises to about 10% of people in this survey was that they found themselves spending through their nest egg quicker than they had anticipated. That's a quote from this survey. And on the flip side, other people in the survey, about 15% said that they have more income now in retirement because of Social Security income, maybe a pension income, and then dipping into their retirement savings. They have more income now while they're retired than they did when they were working. And boy, wouldn't it be awesome if we were all one of those people that had more income coming in retirement than when you were working. So that's something to kind of mention too, is where can you kind of cut costs? And I've heard this over and over from retirees talking to them. When you're trying to plan for traveling, vacations, things like that, when you're retired, you can really pick and choose between the different trips that you take when you go. For example, for airline tickets, typically what you'll find is Tuesdays and Wednesdays are going to be the cheapest flights on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Sunday and Mondays tend to be the most expensive. If you're retired, maybe you can fly out on Tuesday and return on a Wednesday and take advantage of that and save some money. When you're working and you have very limited vacation, maybe that's just not possible. According to nerdwallet.com, the cheapest months to fly are August, September, and January. The most expensive months to fly are December because of Christmas, right? The holiday season, and then June and July. So being retired, when you've got the flexibility, you can really take advantage of the cost savings as you plan your trips and vacations. Other things that retirees said that were sort of a surprise were taxes you still pay taxes in retirement. Some people pay more than others, of course, but that's one thing that kind of surprised some people is, gosh, it just seems like I was told that once I retire, my taxes would go way down. And that just doesn't seem to be the case. And overwhelmingly, I hear from people that they're just shocked that their Social Security benefits are taxed in retirement. Now, most states do not tax your Social Security benefits. And I say most because there's still a handful of states that could tax your Social Security benefit, but that number is fortunately shrinking. For example, just a couple of years ago, my home state of Missouri stopped taxing Social Security income benefits at the state level. Other retirees will joke that, gosh, I go to the doctor more now that I'm retired than I ever did when I was working. So that's very common. I think just with checkups and things like that, and I think really not having to take off work to go to the doctor probably plays a bigger part in that. One of the other surprises that people talk about is just the cost of living, and like eating out has gone up so much that some people will say, gosh, we don't go out to eat as often as we thought we would in retirement just because the cost has gone up so much over the last couple of years. And the biggest benefits that people enjoyed. Again, having more time when every day's a Saturday. You can pick and choose the days that you want to do something. You're not just stuck with trying to get as much done on the weekends or maybe after work, and there's never enough time, it always seems like. In retirement, you have that freedom, that flexibility, and hopefully less stress. And that right there is freedom, especially when you have the time, the resources to do what you want when you want to do it. That's financial independence. And just the happiest people that I see that are retired, when I look at across all the families we work with that are retired, and I ask them, how's retirement going? The ones that seem the happiest say, you know what, I really don't worry about a whole lot. I don't have the financial worries. We have a retirement plan that's been built. It's been well thought out. It's sound. It's in place. And we don't get worked up over the geopolitical environment or the war or what interest rates are doing or who's, in the government. I know what my income is in retirement, where it's coming from, that I can count on it. And then I live my life and I do the things that I want to do with the people I want to do them with. Time and time again, that's what I hear from people that are the happiest retirees. It's almost like they're making a choice to say, hey, I've worked hard for all these years. I've saved. I've worked my tail off to get to where I am today. And all those decisions we've made up until this point has gotten us to where we are today. And all the saving and sacrifice was well worth it. And now we're just going to live our life. I hope this episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast has been helpful. If you have questions or you want to talk to our team at Retire Strong Financial Advisors, go to our website, retirestrongfa.com. I'll see you next time. And remember, always dream big.
Content in this material is for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. The content in this material does not necessarily reflect the views of LPL Financial. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific situation. Your results will vary. The hypothetical rates of return used do not reflect the deduction of fees and charges inherent to investing. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments might be appropriate for you, please consult your attorney, tax advisor, or financial planner prior to investing. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices mentioned are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance your overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect completely against market risk. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Fixed and variable annuities are suitable for long-term investing, such as retirement investing. Gains from tax-deferred investments are taxed as ordinary income upon withdrawal. Guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing company. Withdrawals made prior to age 59 and a half are subject to a 10% IRS penalty tax, and surrender charges may apply. Variable annuities are subject to market risk and may lose value. Riders are additional guarantee options that are available to an annuity or life insurance contract holder. While some riders are part of an existing contract, many others may carry additional fees, charges, and restrictions, and the policyholder should review their contract before purchasing. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Retire Strong Financial Advisors and LPL Financial are not endorsed by or affiliated with the United States Social Security Administration or any government agency. Retire Strong Financial Advisors and LPL Financial are not endorsed by or affiliated with the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services or any government agency.
Thank you for listening to the show today. Check us out at our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. And if you want some help from Greg, submit your questions at the bottom of the page or sign up for a 30-minute retirement coaching session with Greg. We'll see you next week.